Hey, what's up you guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be installing Land Cruiser rear shocks in my Toyota 4Runner. So some of you guys already know in my previous videos, I have a Land Cruiser rear spring lift in my Toyota 4Runner right now. And with that lift, you have to make sure that you pair it with the right shocks. I'm using the Bilstein 5100s in the back, which only gives about 2 inches of down travel. And so right now those springs are being limited by the shocks. And some of you guys also saw in my other video that I actually extended the rear brake line as well. So I shouldn't have any problems flexing the rear end. Let me show you guys some of the parts that we're going to be using for this project. So these are the shocks that we're going to be using. These came out of a Land Cruiser. I'll leave a part number on the screen and also in the video description for you guys, so you guys can find these easier. But you're going to need a couple extra things to make this work. So normally the shock only comes with the bushings. You actually don't get any of the washers, which is kind of unfortunate. So I had to go and chase down these things. And so normally you get these two bushings here and then the two bushings over here that go on the shock bolt. And so I had to go and find some washers to make this work. And so you can see here I went to Home Depot. They actually had the best washers that would fit perfectly, well, near perfectly. And all you want to do is just find the one that's labeled ASD, or if you can't find this one specifically, just find a 1/2 inch hole washer and that should be sufficient. The shaft here is actually a little bit bigger than 1/2 inch. So what you're going to have to do is use a step bit to kind of widen the hole a little bit. And you can see I already did it on one of them. And it's really easy to do. All you need to do is just hold this with a pair of pliers and then just use a step bit and just go slow, and that will make it large enough to go on the shaft. So you can see there, that one's already drilled. This one you don't need to do because it doesn't need to go in the shaft. It actually just needs to stay up here where the threads are, and so you don't have to worry about that. So you just have to drill out two. Another thing that's important that you can't find in the hardware store is this centering washer. So if you already have a good condition one from your OEM 4Runner, which is actually the one you need, you can use that. But you can see right here, this is my original one that I had when I took out the original shocks. You can see it's pretty crusty and pretty bad shape. So you're going to need a new centering washer. And I'll leave a part number for these. These are like $5 a piece with shipping, so they're pretty pricey. If you want to gamble and check your centering washer that you have on the vehicle, then maybe you can use this one. You're going to need this because this is what lines up the hole on the shock tower in the rear. And then it comes with this nut already, and you can see it just goes on just like this. Washer, bushing, centering washer, and then this is going to go up to the shock mount, and then you're going to put another bushing on top, and then the nut itself. And then since we're using these bushings, we're going to want to use some kind of silicone so that way they don't squeak. And we're going to put a little bit of it on there as well. It's probably optional, but I'm going to do it anyways. So the install should be relatively simple and straightforward, hopefully. So we'll find out right now. All right, guys, first thing you want to do is lift the vehicle and get it on jack stands on the frame rails. We're going to be taking the tires off, and that way we can kind of move the differential and kind of unbolt the original shock. I forgot to record the audio here, but just take off your sway bar end links. It should be a 13mm or a 12 or maybe a 14. This will actually allow you to drop the rear axle a lot lower. Alright guys, once you guys have the sway bar off, we're going to remove the shock here so that way the differential can drop. Make sure you put a jack underneath the differential. That way it doesn't fall completely to the ground. I mean, it won't fall completely to the ground, but you know what I mean. So this is a 17mm. So you don't lose track of what way all this stuff goes back in. And then take a pry bar. See if you can pry it out. There we go. Alright guys, make sure you do the same to the other side. Take off the shock bolt and then also the sway bar end link. And then from there, you should be able to drop the differential a lot lower. Remember, the new shock is a lot longer. And then now we're going to focus on taking off this shock. This is probably the worst part of the project, and we're going to see how it goes. Alright guys, it's a little crowded down here, but I wanted to show you guys the technique for removing the top shock nut. So if you guys have the original shocks, the easiest way is to probably just break it off and just grab the shaft and just keep shaking it back and forth.
until you fatigue it enough and it just breaks off. That'll be the fastest and easiest. If you're trying to preserve your shock like I am, these Bilsteins are pretty new and I don't really want to destroy it. You can wedge a 17 millimeter or whatever the nut size is up against the frame, and then this here is actually a hex nut driver, or it has a hex head. It's a 5 millimeter, and I'm using the hex to ratchet, and so I just wedge that up against the frame and it's loosening the top nut with this, but when I ratchet this, it'll kind of spin the shaft and get it off easier. This way you can use a ratchet, and you can see it's coming off pretty easily now. Alright guys, here it comes. There we go. Alright guys, we got the shock out, and I wanted to give you guys a closer look at what the setup looks like. So this is a 5 millimeter hex head here. It's just one of those Allen heads. It's on a 1/4 inch ratcheting drive, and then I have a standard 17 millimeter box end wrench. And all you need to do is just put this on top of the nut like so, wedge that up against the frame, and then put this guy in on top, and it's just gonna fit in there really nicely. And then figure out which way you need to go, and most likely it's the opposite direction. I can't remember right now. Right now I have it on actually, so this side will wedge up against the frame, and then as you're kind of ratcheting this, it'll kind of loosen this top nut here. If you don't do that, you're going to end up wasting a lot of time like I did on the driver's side. There's a lot of threads on here, and because it's a nylon lock nut, there's no way you're going to take it off quickly. So this is a pretty crucial part, and I wanted to share it with you guys because I spent almost a half an hour doing the other one, and I wasn't going to do it again. Alright guys, let's go ahead and get everything ready to be reassembled. So you're going to want to lubricate everything with some kind of grease. Just got this silicone paste here. So yeah, just lubricate everything and let's get it ready to go. So the way everything goes in is washer first, bushing, and then centering washer, and then this will go up against the frame, and then on top you'll have the bushing, another washer, and then the nut, and that'll be it. Alright guys, I wanted to cut in here just to let you guys know that I ran into so many problems installing this rear shock. First with the top nut not coming off on the old Bilsteins, and I showed you guys a little technique for that. And then when I actually got to installing the rear shock, I noticed that the bushings were a little bit too thick and tall, so I ended up having to trim off about 1/4 inch on the top just so that the top nut can actually start. I tried a whole bunch of things like jacking up the axle so that I can compress the bushings a little bit so I can start it, but it was just a little bit off and I couldn't get it on there. And then one thing I didn't show on the passenger side is actually how to get it in there and what the technique I used was, but I will show you guys that on the driver's side. So just make sure you keep watching because it's going to be the exact same method. Alright guys, here's where we're at. I just went and cut this off a little bit with a razor blade. Here's the original size and the new one. So you can see it's, I don't know, maybe 1/4 inch cut off. And that allowed me to start the thread. So I'm going to go ahead and put this on top and wrap up the passenger side here. Alright you guys, thought I'd give you guys an update. On this side I did have to remove that panhard bar. It's just a 17 millimeter. The bolt's going to be pretty stuck in there, but what you can do is jack up this side all the way up with the jack under this little trailing arm mount here, and then the bolt should come out pretty easily. Alright guys, so on this side what you need to do is put the shock in first, and then you can compress this down. See how it doesn't clear the frame right now? You can compress it, and it takes a little bit of time, but it's not too bad. And then it'll clear the frame, and then as it comes back up, make sure you line it up with the hole and put all your bushing in, obviously. And there you go. So now you got the lower bolt in, got this guy in. Now you can jack it up a little bit, and then it'll line up with the centering washer here. We're just making sure that centering washer is lined up in there. Alright, now we're going to put our top bushing and washer on, and it goes in like this. This side faces the metal. And I know I'm in your way, but there's not much room in here. And then the nut. Now that one just requires a regular 17. You don't need to hold it or anything like that. You just put it on there and tighten it down.
now you can torque down the top, torque down the bottom. I'll put the torque specs on the screen for you guys. And then once you do that, we're gonna jack up the driver's side here, so that way we can line this guy back up in here. We put the sway bar end links back in and we should be done. Alright, so just keep jacking it up until you can line up that bolt hole. There we go. And I put the torque spec on the screen, but I think it's 67 foot-pounds. Alright guys, now that everything's buttoned back up, you got your pan hard bar back together, your shocks are all bolted back up. Now you can just jack up the rear axle and line up the sway bar end links back into their little holes, and then put the bushing and the washers back on, and then the top nuts, and then torque that down to 14 foot-pounds or until it's tight and the bushings are compressing a little bit. And then after that, put the wheels back on and torque those to 85 foot-pounds and you should be done with the job. Unfortunately guys, I don't have any footage for you guys of me actually using this on the trail. Some of you guys already know I'm from Central California, and if you haven't heard about the creek fire, that creek fire is about 20 miles away from me, and all the local trails are all closed down because of it. Well guys, hopefully you guys enjoyed that video. It took me a long time to figure out all the kinks, so hopefully when you guys do this job yourselves, you won't run into all the issues that I ran. And mainly that has to do with finding parts, drilling out the washer, cutting the bushing to make it fit the 4runner, and then figuring all the techniques to get everything off and on. So hopefully this video helps you guys if you guys plan on putting Land Cruiser shocks in your 4runner. I have part numbers and links to everything I use in the video. If you guys have any questions, make sure you leave them down in the comments below. If you guys like this video, please hit the like button. It really helps my channel out a lot. If you guys like videos like this, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I've got many more mods planned for this Toyota 4Runner of mine. And also, if you guys didn't know, I have tons of other videos on my 4Runner on my channel, so don't forget to check those out as well. As always guys, have a nice day.